The room is small and aching with silence, as Avery Cole knelt on worn boards and whispered a prayer she barely believed. The candle before her breathed a thin flame that shivered like a frightened animal. "Avery Cole," said, "if anyone hears me, I am tired of being empty." The air thickened and tasted metallic, as if pennies melted on her tongue and ran into her lungs. Shadows slid against the walls in defiance of the candle's sway and gathered behind her shoulders. Avery Cole said, "I do not want a sign if it breaks me." The flame stretched long and pale like a blade and split the dark like a seam ripped open. The floor hummed as if a choir of machines sang beneath the house, and it rattled her ribs. Cold white fire burst from the wick and drowned the room in winter light without heat. "Avery Cole," said, "please. I am not ready," though the words cracked and felt borrowed. A tall silhouette rose inside the light, with edges that flowed like molten silver and never held still. There were no footsteps and no breath from any mouth she could see or trust. A pressure like weather knelt on her back and pressed her forehead lower to the floor. The voice did not travel through air but rang inside her chest like a struck bell. It did not echo, yet every part of her shook as if hearing thunder underwater. The voice said, "You have been seen," and the words left a mark she could not touch. Avery Cole said, "Seen by who?" Yet she already knew and wanted to unknow it. The light receded, but did not die, lingering behind her sternum like a coal wrapped in frost, and Avery staggered to her feet as the room settled. Avery Cole said, "Seen by who?" and the floor offered no answer but the soft complaint of wood. The candle sulked back into an ordinary flame, as if embarrassed by its own miracle. Her phone lay dark on the nightstand, black glass that refused to reflect her face. Avery Cole said, "If this is madness, let it be brief," and she tasted the coin's sour air again. The shadows obeyed the candle now, yet their rhythm felt rehearsed, like actors who knew the plot. She touched her chest and felt the echo of the voice, not as sound, but as a bruise of meaning. Avery Cole said, "I have been seen," and the words both steadied and threatened her. She remembered pews and hymns and the kind of silence that was shaped like welcome. She remembered the night she walked away and blamed the dark for her own closed eyes. Avery Cole said, "I will not beg for another sign," yet hunger uncoiled beneath the fear. The house creaked like an elder clearing its throat to speak. Outside, crickets performed a shy orchestra that would not enter the room. She watched the flame and waited for a tremor that did not come, and then she breathed. Morning broke thin and gray, and Avery brewed coffee that smelled like a promise she did not trust. The voice had left a print where names could not reach, and it pulsed when she tried to ignore it. Avery Cole said, "Work will rinse this out," and she opened her laptop, but the keys felt like cold teeth. An unread message from Lucas Reed waited with its ordinary subject line and its heavy kindness. Lucas Reed said, "I know I failed you once, but I'm trying to be clean," and the words bruised a place she had guarded. Avery Cole said, "I am not your priest, Lucas," though her chest warmed and warned her. The memory of the white fire arrived like a sunrise she did not order and pressed her to the chair. She typed nothing, erased nothing, and watched the cursor blink like a patient heartbeat. Avery Cole said, "I do not want to need anyone," and the empty mug confessed nothing. She considered telling Pastor Miriam Hale and feared becoming a story to be rescued. She considered telling no one and feared becoming a cave. Avery Cole said, "Seen is not saved," and the line frightened and comforted her in the same breath. By noon, the city hummed like nothing had changed, and Avery slipped into the back pew of a near-empty church that smelled of lemon oil and dust. Sun cut through stained glass and painted the aisle with borrowed saints. Pastor Miriam Hale stood near the chancel, arranging bulletins with the patience of weather. Avery Cole said, "I did not come for counsel," and the denial sounded like a question that needed a witness. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "You came for air, you can breathe," and looked up with eyes that kept their promises. The pew wood pressed her spine into an upright honesty she rarely allowed. Avery Cole said something saw me, and the word something felt too small and too large. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Not everything that sees you comes to harm you," and her smile carried a cautious hope. The memory of white fire flickered in the corners of Avery's sight like a held note. Ow! Avery wanted to run and wanted to kneel, and could not choose without tearing in half. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "When the light is cold, it still reveals," and handed her a hymnal. Avery Cole said, "I am afraid of being known," and the confession softened the air between them. Evening returned with a softer edge, and Avery walked by the river where the city's lights stitched a wavering seam across the water. The voice inside her chest no longer shouted, but waited with the patience of tide. Avery Cole said, "If I am seen, teach me to look back," and the words surprised her with their steadiness. Wind pressed her jacket and brought the faint smell of rain that never arrived. She remembered Lucas and the bruise of his apology, and wondered if forgiveness could be a language she relearned. She remembered Pastor Miriam's eyes, and how they did not try to fix the weather of her soul. Avery Cole said, "I am not ready for miracles, but I am done with hiding," and the river accepted the sentence without opinion. The street lamps hummed and set halos on the wet stones, and the night held open a narrow door. Avery Cole said, "If there is more, I will step when I hear it," and her breath fogged like a vow that feared itself. Across the dark, a silver glimmer flickered, and then stilled as if it had only ever been water. She waited, and the waiting did not break her. Morning wore a clean face that Avery did not trust, and the church doors sighed when she pushed them open. The scent of dust and citrus promised order that her chest refused. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "You came early," and did not make it a question. Avery Cole said, "I could not sleep," and the truth rattled like a small stone in a jar. Sunlight braided through stained glass, and lay across the pew like a quiet hand. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "What did the light take?" and waited as if silence could be translated. Avery Cole said, "It took my excuses," and the words frightened her with their weight. The sanctuary hummed with vents and memory, steady as a metronome. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Being seen is not the same as being judged," and her voice made room around the fear. Avery Cole said, "I want to belong without becoming a story," and her mouth felt unsteady. She remembered cold white fire, and how it named her without syllables. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Let the naming continue," and she set a hymnal down as if it were bread. Avery Cole said, "I do not know how to pray and mean it," and her eyes avoided the cross. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Begin with what hurts," and the air softened into something she could breathe. At a corner cafe that believed in second chances, Jordan Blake arrived with a skeptical grin and a notebook he treated like armor. Jordan Blake said, "You look like someone who touched a live wire," and his eyes measured everything. Avery Cole said, "I slept badly," and watched steam twist from her cup like a quiet omen. The street outside kept ordinary time, and that felt like betrayal. Jordan Blake said, "Miriam told me you needed facts more than candles," and he waited to provoke. Avery Cole said, "I needed a witness," and the confession surprised them both. He tapped his pen against the table, the way a judge taps a gavel. Jordan Blake said, "Visions are just brains breaking pattern," and he offered a tidy exit. Avery Cole said, "Then why did it call me by what I hide?" and the question refused to shrink. He blinked, then wrote nothing, and the pause widened like a crack in ice. Jordan Blake said, "What did it want?" and his voice lost its edge. Avery Cole said, "For me to stop pretending I am fine," and the room seemed to lean closer. The coffee cooled, but something warmer stayed. Lucas Reed waited on the church steps like a man approaching parole, and his smile carried dents where years had bitten. Lucas Reed said, "I am trying to be honest," and his hands stayed visible, palms empty. Avery Cole said, "Honesty costs more than regret," and she felt the price rise in her throat. The sky was a hard blue that showed every flaw in unkind detail. Lucas Reed said, "I am clean 90 days," and the number shook like a newborn foal. She remembered nights when he rang her doorbell and asked to borrow trust, he never returned. Avery Cole said, I believed you before, and the stairs beneath her feet felt like a jury. Lucas Reed said, I believed me then too, and he laughed softly without joy. A city bus hissed and hauled away judgment that no one had voiced. Avery Cole said, I am learning how mercy does not mean forgetting, and she listened for the voice that had marked her. Lucas Reed said, mercy is a craft, and his eyes held water he refused to spill. Avery Cole said, if I forgive, I still need guardrails, and the word felt like a gate that could open. He nodded, and the gate did not slam. Back at her apartment, the ordinary resumed its stubborn reign, but the air felt tuned to a key she could finally hear. Avery Cole said, I will not chase wonders, and she closed the blinds against the bright. The white fire memory lived under her ribs like a clean ache. Her phone vibrated with a message from Jordan that read like a question hiding in facts. Jordan Blake said, if something spoke, test it, and the doubt sounded almost protective. Avery Cole said, I will test with kindness first, and the sentence calmed her hands. She wrote to Lucas and asked for small steps and clear hours, not promises. Lucas Reed said, I can meet structure, and his reply felt like lumber and nails. She set Pastor Miriam's hymnal on the table like a map she might trust. Pastor Miriam Hale said, begin where you stand, and the line from their talk arrived like bread. Avery Cole said, I am not healed, but I am not hiding, and the room accepted the claim. Evening light laid a ribbon on the floor, and she let it stay. Dusk gathered like a careful teacher, and Avery walked the neighborhood where porch lights stitched a patient path. The world did not glow white, yet it felt watched in a way that did not accuse. Avery Cole said, if I am seen, let me see truly, and the plea tasted clean. A stray dog trotted past with a dignity that made her smile. A window opened and a woman laughed, and the sound loosened a knot near her heart. Avery Cole said, I will not confuse drama with depth, and she slowed her steps. The street was ordinary and holy in the same breath if she allowed it. Pastor Miriam Hale said, grace is movement toward the other, and the remembered line walked beside her. Jordan Blake said, call me if the lights talk again, and she laughed in spite of herself. Lucas Reed said, thank you for the chance, and she felt the word chance choose both of them. Avery Cole said, I can live without spectacle, but not without meaning. And the sentence landed true. Somewhere within, the coal of white fire warmed without burning. Night came thin as tissue, and Avery Cole woke to light, creeping under her door like a question. A hum threaded the floorboards, low and even, as if the house had learned to breathe. Avery Cole said, I will not chase it, and her voice steadied itself by will. The mirror in the hall caught a glint that did not belong to any lamp she owned. A thread of silver drew a line across her chest, bright as chalk, then vanished like a shy animal. From the kitchen her phone chimed with a message that felt heavier than its words. Lucas Reed said, I made amends to 3 people today, and she felt the door inside her shift. Avery Cole said, keep going, and the reply tasted simple and brave. A draft curled, though no window was open, and the candle on the counter lurched without flame. Shadows leaned toward her like listeners who knew old songs. The veil whispered from the blank TV, you can be clean without change, and the chill worked its way inward. Avery Cole said, I will change or break, and the line chose her before she chose it. Somewhere close, a bell rang without metal, and the night waited for her answer. Avery stood in the doorway between kitchen and hall, and felt the room tilt, not with panic but with naming. Eli gathered from the corner like fog learning a shape, edges rippling with molten silver. The light did not hurt this time, it asked. Avery Cole said, if you see me, show me what is true, and her hands opened despite fear. Eli said, truth begins where you stop rehearsing, and the words fell like cool water. The fridge motor clicked a steady amen that made her want to laugh and cry. Eli said, the wound you hide is the altar you refuse, and the hum deepened. Avery Cole said, I walked away before I was left, and the sentence burned clean. Eli did not move, yet the room shifted so that the door behind her no longer led to escape. From the hall, a photo frame rattled, then stilled, as if history had changed chairs. Avery Cole said, What if I am not strong enough? And the quiet waited like a teacher. Eli said, Strength is borrowed, faith is returned, and the silver edges thinned into air. The kitchen clock stumbled, then found the beat again, as if time had agreed to walk beside her. Avery Cole said, Then teach me to borrow, and the request felt like a door that wanted hinges. Jordan Blake kept his promises to doubt, yet he came to Avery's apartment with a toolbox of logic. Jordan Blake said, We will rule out wires and wishful thinking, and he set his notebook beside the sink. The candle stood unlit, a surrendered witness, and the air felt mild and honest. Avery Cole said, If nothing happens, I will still breathe, and the words steadied the floor. He traced outlets, checked breakers, and labeled each circuit like a cartographer. The TV reflected only two ordinary people, trying not to need miracles. Jordan Blake said, Explainable is merciful, and he almost smiled. The kitchen light dimmed without flicker, as if a hand covered the sun, and stayed that way. From the counter, the hymnal turned a page without wind, landing on a psalm about being searched and known. Jordan Blake said, Airflow, yet his throat lost conviction. Avery Cole said, Ask your question out loud, and his mouth opened before his mind agreed. Jordan Blake said, If you are there, audit me. And the word there filled the room like a tide. The light returned to full, calm as a heartbeat finding tempo, and the two of them did not speak for a while. Sleep came like a treaty, and then it broke. Avery walked a hallway made of doors that led to versions of her life where nothing cost anything. The veil waited beside a mirror that did not reflect, a figure stitched from smoke and promise. The veil said, You can keep your secrets and still be called brave, and the offer glittered like foil. Avery Cole said, Brave without truth is costume, and the hall narrowed around the words. One door opened onto a church where she never left, and never learned mercy, only performance. Another opened onto a room with Lucas frozen at 90 days forever, safe and false. Avery Cole said, I will not choose cages that feel soft, and her hand moved past the knobs. The veil said, Pain is optional if you stop telling the whole story, and the mirror darkened further. Avery's chest ached where the white fire lived, a coal that refused counterfeit light. Avery Cole said, I will pay in honesty, and the hall pressed forward like a river. The doors slammed shut behind her, and the echo woke her into a dark that finally felt clean. Dawn found Avery on the church steps with coffee cooling fast and resolve, warming slow. The street swept itself awake, and she counted breaths until her ribs learned the new rhythm. Pastor Miriam Hale said, You look like someone who left a door locked on purpose and waited gently. Avery Cole, said the veil, offered easy paths, and her voice did not tremble. Pastor Miriam Hale said, Ease without truth burns later, and she tipped her head toward the sanctuary. Inside, the light wore ordinary clothes, and that felt like a gift. Avery Cole said, I will help Lucas set guardrails, and the commitment steadied her mouth. She texted Jordan and thanked him for asking a question he did not trust yet. Jordan Blake said, Data respects what happened, and he did not add a joke. Avery knelt in a back pew and let silence fill the places she had padded with noise. Avery Cole said, I choose change even if it cracks me, and the coal inside brightened without flame. Somewhere near, a bell rang with metal this time, and the day opened like a door that would not slam. Morning scraped the sky clean, while Avery sorted a shoebox of papers she had refused to touch. The white fire memory pulsed like a heartbeat under glass. Avery Cole said, If truth begins where I stop rehearsing, then let it begin. A folded HR letter from her old nonprofit stared like an unpaid debt. The date landed like a gavel, and a name rose from the ink that bent her ribs. Lucas Reed had been flagged for a missing petty cash envelope the week she resigned. Avery Cole said, I wrote the escalation to shield my promotion, and her throat burned. The veil murmured, "You were surviving," and offered a soft blanket made of lies. She remembered the meeting where she let silence imply guilt that was not his. Pastor Miriam Hale had said, "Begin where you stand," and the floor steadied. Avery Cole said, "I traded him to save face," and the box felt heavier than wood. Her palms sweated until the paper curled like a leaf in heat. The hum in the room thickened, and dust turned to glitter as light shifted. Eli gathered near the doorway like a tide learning grammar. Eli said, "Name it fully," and the room waited for her to be exact. Avery Cole said, "I made a choice that helped break him," and the sentence fit. The records office smelled like toner and old apologies, and Jordan signed the guest log with a steady hand. Jordan Blake said, "We verify before we confess," and he meant mercy. Avery Cole said, "I will tell him either way," and the elevator hid her breath. The clerk fetched a file that wore the color of rain, and the paper crackled. Inside, the audit noted a camera outage, and a supervisor's rumor that became policy. Jordan Blake said, "Your email pushed the rumor uphill," and his voice softened. The veil said, "Everyone does this once," and the fluorescent bulbs hummed approval. Avery Cole said, "I did it when he was fragile," and the words stuck to her teeth. A photocopy revealed the envelope, found later in a desk she had shared. Jordan Blake said, "Exculpatory and archived," and his pen halted midair. Heat rose in her face like a siren that could not be ignored. Avery Cole said, "I let the truth arrive too late," and the file trembled in her hands. Eli was not visible, yet the room leaned toward clarity. Jordan Blake said, "We draft an amends plan that includes the organization," and he closed the folder. Avery Cole said, "I will sign my name to the harm and the repair," and she meant it. They met on the church steps where small truths could breathe, and the air carried cut grass and rain threat. Lucas Reed said, "You look like a verdict," and tried to smile without defense. Avery Cole said, "I wrote the email that made your name heavy," and she did not look away. Wind moved the bulletin board and made it sound like pages turning. Lucas Reed said, "I did wrong things after, but that push hurt," and he kept his hands open. Avery Cole said, "I chose my image over your future," and the world tilted into view. He sat, as if the step needed company, and the stone cooled their heat. Lucas Reed said, "Are you telling me to take back the years?" And the question had no venom. Avery Cole said, "I am telling you I owe repair, not absolution," and her voice stayed steady. The veil said, "Trade pain for blame," and the temptation felt sweet and cheap. Lucas Reed said, "I will not spend this on revenge," and his mouth shook. Avery Cole said, "I will speak to the board and clear you in writing," and the vow landed. A siren wailed far off, and then dissolved into ordinary city noise. Lucas Reed said, "Then we build guardrails that hold," and he finally breathed. Avery Cole said, "I am here for the building," and the step felt sacred. Inside the sanctuary, colors from stained glass crawled across pews like patient rivers. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Confession widens the room and set tissues where pride could reach them." Avery Cole said, "The white fire marked me the night I began to repay a debt I made." Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Light will return what fear pawned," and her hands folded quiet. Eli gathered again, edges gentle, and stood where sunlight thinned into shadow. Eli said, "You were seen long before the harm, and not for the harm alone," and the air cleared. The revelation struck that Lucas had prayed for mercy the night she wrote that email. "Avery Cole," said the same watchfulness held us both, and the shock felt kind, not cruel. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Threads cross before we notice," and her smile held weather. The veil hissed, coincidence, but its breath smelled like dust. Eli said, "Intercession leaves footprints," and a chill passed that did not wound. Avery Cole said, "If we share the same rescue, I will not hoard it," and the pew steadied her bones. The clock near the choir loft ticked in time with her breathing, until quiet turned bright. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Make the call to the board tonight," and the river of color kept moving. Night settled without threat, and Avery drafted a statement that named the harm without varnish. The cursor blinked like a metronome for courage, and she kept time. "Avery Cole," said I, escalated a rumor as fact, which contributed to Lucas Reed's dismissal, and she read it aloud. She added the archived evidence and her steps for restitution and public correction. Jordan Blake said, "I will co-sign as witness to the record," and the email gained backbone. The Veil tried one more bargain: "If you soften the verbs, they will like you more." Avery Cole said, "They do not have to like me for this to be true," and she kept the verbs sharp. Eli did not speak, yet the room brightened like dawn under a door. Pastor Miriam Hale texted when ready, "Press send and then breathe," and the words felt like a hand. Avery pressed send and listened to the tiny whoosh that felt larger than thunder. Silence followed, and then relief arrived with no fireworks, only peace. Lucas Reed said, "I received your copy," and his reply was short and whole. Avery Cole said, "I am learning grace with receipts," and the coal within her warmed. Outside, the city lights bowed to nothing and still shone, and that was enough. The boardroom lights hummed with sterile patience, and Avery Cole stood before a table of faces carved in stillness. The file lay open, pages squared like evidence against her. Avery Cole said, "I escalated a rumor as fact, which damaged Lucas Reed," and her breath caught fire. A chair creaked, but no voice followed. The Veil whispered, "Soften the verbs. They prefer apologies without teeth," and the chill gnawed at her spine. Avery Cole said, "I do not soften what was sharpened by my hand," and the words rang. A woman in the corner noted every syllable like a ledger that judged without sneer. Avery spread the exculpatory document, proof Lucas had not stolen, and pushed it forward. Silence bloomed heavy, then a cough broke it open. Pastor Miriam Hale sat in the back row, steady as scaffolding, her eyes like held water. Avery Cole said, "Restitution is owed, and I will repay with interest," and the table absorbed it. A board member leaned back, tapped a pen, and finally said, "You are asking to be trusted with your own undoing." Avery Cole said, "Yes, and with its repair," and her chest loosened. The coal of white fire glowed under her ribs, like an ember declaring itself flame. Afterward, the hall outside the boardroom smelled of lemon polish and nerves. Jordan Blake leaned against the wall with his notebook shut. Jordan Blake said, "You spoke with surgical verbs," and his eyes hinted at respect. Avery Cole said, "Truth does not need padding," and her pulse steadied. He opened his mouth to argue, then let silence do the work. Lucas Reed stood near the exit, with his hands open like an unarmed man. Lucas Reed said, "They heard it," and his face carried both ache and relief. Avery Cole said, "I cleared your name, but I cannot return the years," and shame stung. Lucas Reed said, "Guardrails held me through worse," and he touched the step with his shoe like grounding. The Veil slithered near the ceiling light, whispering, "They still doubt you." Avery Cole said, "Doubt is earned. Faith is too," and the whisper thinned. Jordan Blake said, "I logged their questions. None disproved your confession," and his tone steadied her. Avery Cole said, "Then the rest belongs to mercy," and she opened the door into night. That night, the apartment was still, yet Avery sensed the air had an audience. Eli appeared near the window frame, silver edges rippling like liquid steel. Avery Cole said, "I confessed in full," and her body felt lighter. Eli said, "Light widens when shadows step back," and the words poured quiet into her bones. Avery Cole said, "I feared the board's rejection more than the truth, and now the fear shrank." Eli said, "Rejection trims ego, not essence," and the room steadied. She saw herself younger, gripping false accolades like currency, and the vision burned out. Avery Cole said Lucas forgave without demanding, and the sentence softened. Eli said, "Mercy restores what law cannot," and the silver glowed softer. The Veil hissed from the corner, "You will relapse into secrecy," but its voice cracked thin. Avery Cole said, I am watched by mercy, not perfection, and the coal brightened. Eli said, then walk, even if limping, and faded with a shimmer. Avery stood taller, though the room held no one left to witness. Sunday morning carried bells that felt heavier than usual, and Avery stepped into the sanctuary with no hiding left. The hymns rose like scaffolding, and every verse carried more weight. Pastor Miriam Hale said, when grace names you, it does not untell the past, and her voice rang. Avery Cole said, I am known, and still breathing, and her chest lifted. The congregation, sparse but steady, turned their heads with curiosity, not cruelty. Lucas Reed joined in the back pew, his lips moving with psalms, not excuses. Jordan Blake scribbled notes like a man recording evidence he could not deny. The veil whispered, they see a fraud, but its hiss had lost teeth. Avery Cole said, they see a witness to repair, and she knelt with ease. Pastor Miriam Hale lifted the hymnal and guided the next verse. Eli was not visible, yet the air shimmered like unseen scaffolding. Avery Cole said, if this is what seen feels like, I accept it, and the line settled like stone underfoot. Evening draped the riverwalk in copper light, and Avery let silence hold her hand. The city skyline blinked alive, ordinary and holy, in the same frame. Avery Cole said, I am not done, but I am begun, and her chest steadied. The water mirrored skyscrapers, yet it also mirrored her without distortion. Lucas Reed joined her, no invitation needed, and leaned on the rail. Lucas Reed said, 95 days today, and pride lived in the number. Avery Cole said, each day is a stone, and we are stacking walls that won't fall, and the air warm. Jordan Blake sent a text. Faith is data I can't disprove, and she smiled. Pastor Miriam Hale's blessing echoed, mercy leaves residue, and she let it linger. The veil hovered, thin as mist, but dissolved when the wind lifted. Eli shimmered faintly in the skyline reflection, silent but present. Avery Cole said, if I am seen, let me also see, and the vow tasted clean. The river moved with quiet certainty, carrying her words into night. The night pressed heavy, and Avery Cole stood alone in the sanctuary as the last candle flickered low. The silence weighed like iron, too thick for breath. Avery Cole said, if this is my trial, let it be honest, and her voice quivered. The veil uncoiled from the altar, vast and shifting smoke, shaped into a human outline with jagged eyes. The veil said, you confess, but you are still mine. Doubt is a chain you polish. Shadows thickened, until even stained glass lost color. Avery Cole said, I will not serve shame anymore, though her knees threatened to give. The coal of white fire under her ribs pulsed against her chest like a second heartbeat. Eli appeared in the nave, silver edges gleaming like molten armor, unbent by the dark. Eli said, this is the hour of choosing, and the air tightened. The veil hissed, she is weak, she hides, she betrays. Avery Cole said, I betray lies now, and her body trembled as if the words cost blood. The sanctuary roared without sound, and the candle flared cold white, painting her in flame. The veil surged forward, its smoke twisting into claws that struck against unseen walls of light. Avery staggered as the force crashed through her ribs like waves against rock. Eli said, stand, not by strength but by surrender, and silver ripples shielded her. Avery Cole said, if I am seen, then see me fail and rise, and her voice cracked but carried. The veil said, you cannot rise from what you deserve, and shadows poured down like ink. The coal in her chest split open and filled her veins with heat that burned cold. Avery Cole said, mercy is mine, not my disguise, and lifted trembling hands. Light seeped from her fingertips like threads weaving air. The veil screamed without sound, a vibration that shattered glass in the upper windows. Avery fell to her knees, but the glow in her chest swelled brighter than her breath. Eli said, now the veil is torn, and the dark form fractured. The sanctuary pulsed, the floor vibrating as if heaven had struck it open. The veil reformed, thinner but sharper, a blade of smoke cutting across pews. Avery collapsed forward, sweat dampening her collar. The veil said, "Every wound proves me right," and its voice dragged stone. Avery Cole said, "Every wound proves I survived," and blood filled her mouth. Eli's edges flickered, as if strained by the fight. Avery Cole said, "I cannot fight alone," and her cry echoed through broken windows. From the back, Jordan Blake burst in, face pale with disbelief at the sight. Jordan Blake said, "I cannot explain this, but I will not deny it." And he stepped forward. Lucas Reed appeared behind him, clutching the rail as if sobriety itself carried him here. Lucas Reed said, "Guardrails hold when others hold them too," and his voice steadied Avery. The veil hissed, "They are frail as you," but its form flickered. Avery Cole said, "Together we stand," and the white fire surged outward, wrapping the sanctuary in light. The veil convulsed and shrieked into cracks, retreating toward the shadows. The sanctuary floor shook as the veil swelled one final time, desperate and jagged. Pastor Miriam Hale entered through the side door, her calm like stone. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "The light reveals, even cold," and lifted the hymnal. She began to sing, her voice low but sharp, cutting through smoke. Avery Cole said, "I am afraid, but I will not hide," and fire seared her throat. The veil screamed, "You will always belong to shame," and lunged. Pastor Miriam Hale sang louder, each note like a rung in a ladder of light. Jordan Blake gripped Avery's shoulder, whispering, "Data cannot deny what I see." Lucas Reed prayed aloud, "Keep us sober, keep us true," and his words held like steel. Avery Cole said, "If I belong, it is to mercy," and the coal burst. A column of white fire erupted, not consuming but cleansing, and the veil shattered into sparks. Eli stood tall, silver edges calm, and said, "The test is met." The sanctuary exhaled, and silence returned holy. Smoke drifted upward, dissolving like ink in water, leaving the sanctuary raw but clear. Avery Cole dropped to her knees, chest heaving, but her eyes burned with steady light. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "You faced your wound, and it did not consume you," and her hands rested on the pew. Jordan Blake scribbled nothing, only stared, shaken but grounded. Jordan Blake said, "I cannot explain, but I will not deny," and his notebook closed. Lucas Reed helped Avery to her feet, his hand strong, his face wet with tears. Lucas Reed said, "Guardrails held because you built them with us," and his grip steadied. Eli stood taller than all, silver edges soft, and said, "She is seen, and she stands." Avery Cole said, "I feared the fire would end me, but it remade me," and her voice rang true. The coal under her ribs no longer burned cold, it glowed warm like a hearth. Outside, dawn cracked the horizon, light bending through shattered glass into new colors. Avery Cole said, "Let this day begin without hiding," and silence agreed. Dawn unfurled across the sanctuary's broken windows, laying rivers of light across the pews like blessings. Avery Cole stood at the altar, shoulders squared, chest rising with a steady rhythm. Avery Cole said, "I am still seen, and I still stand," and her words rang. Pastor Miriam Hale approached with calm steps, carrying no sermon notes, only presence. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Your trial became your testimony," and her eyes softened. Jordan Blake leaned in the doorway, notebook unopened, his silence louder than questions. Jordan Blake said, "I witnessed truth that refused my doubt," and his mouth twitched toward a smile. Lucas Reed sat on the front pew, hands clasped, sober eyes fixed forward. Lucas Reed said, "Guardrails held because you let us build them too," and his voice cracked. Eli shimmered faintly above the altar, not towering but resting like silver smoke in sunlight. Eli said, "Seen, not as wounded but as whole," and the sound stirred the air. Avery Cole said, "If I am whole, it is not because I am perfect, but because I chose the light," and the moment held still. Later that morning, the city street felt newly washed, though no rain had fallen. Avery walked with Lucas Reed, their steps matched in rhythm, their silence companionable. Lucas Reed said, "Freedom feels fragile, but it holds if you feed it daily," and his words carried weight. Avery Cole said, "I once fed my pride, now I will feed my honesty," and she felt taller. A passing bus hissed and carried voices that no longer startled her. Jordan Blake caught up, pen in pocket, knot in hand. Jordan Blake said, "You realize your confession is now evidence of mercy, not crime," and he kept pace. Avery Cole said, "Let evidence testify beyond me," and her tone carried resolve. The veil lingered in the corner of a reflection, thin as mist, but dissolved in sunlight. Pastor Miriam Hale's text chimed on her phone. "The board will issue correction and restitution." Avery Cole read it aloud, and Lucas exhaled like stone lifted. Together, they reached the crosswalk as the signal flashed green, and the city opened ahead. That afternoon, Avery returned to the river where the city's skyline mirrored itself in calm water. She leaned on the railing, feeling her chest's coal glow, soft as a hearth. Avery Cole said, "I feared the fire, but I found warmth," and the words settled into air. Jordan Blake stood a step back, camera slung but unused. Jordan Blake said, "Not all truths fit my notebook, but this one lives anyway," and his voice surprised him. Lucas Reed joined, tossing a pebble that rippled out, rings widening until they vanished. Lucas Reed said, "Guardrails become bridges when others walk them," and smiled. Pastor Miriam Hale arrived later, scarf tugged by wind, her steps deliberate. Pastor Miriam Hale said, "Mercy is residue that shines," and her presence stilled the moment. Eli shimmered in the water's reflection, faint but unbroken. Avery Cole said, "I see now, not as a prisoner but as one free," and the river carried it away. Evening drew long shadows, and Avery sat at her apartment desk, the hymnal open like a map. The coal in her chest pulsed with warmth that no longer frightened. Avery Cole said, "If I am seen, let me also see others," and her fingers traced the page. She wrote letters of amends to those harmed by her silence, each word slow and deliberate. Jordan Blake texted, "The board issued full correction today," and her eyes wet. Lucas Reed sent, "Day 96," and she smiled at the rhythm. Pastor Miriam Hale called, her voice steady, "Tomorrow, we meet to plan restitution work." Avery Cole said, "Yes, I will stand there too," and her heart eased. Eli flickered near the lamp, edges softer now like silver fog resting. Eli said, "Wholeness grows by being shared, and then dissolved." Avery's breath steadied, and the silence that remained felt like prayer answered. The final night came soft, the sky velvet with stars hidden by city haze. Avery walked again to the river, alone this time, but not lonely. She leaned on the rail where once she had begged for signs. Avery Cole said, "Now, I do not beg, I bear witness," and her chest glowed softly. The skyline lights trembled in the water as if bowing without command. Eli's voice whispered in her ribs, "You are seen, and you see," and silence followed. Avery Cole said, "That is enough," and the night agreed. A breeze carried laughter from a distant street, and it sounded like absolution. She closed her eyes, the coal warm, the fire no longer feared. Avery Cole said, "Let tomorrow open without fear," and her breath fogged lightly in cool air. She smiled, not for others, but for herself, and for the first time in years, it stayed. The river moved with quiet certainty, carrying her vow forward into the dark that was no longer her enemy.